So what we did, I suppose, we got back to the basics. And that was finding out who we were, market segmentation, define your target audience, find your USPs and pushing those, and trying to stand out from the crowd, especially in I suppose, an area where there's a lot of competition. In terms of who we are, this is a little bit of humor that our marketing person put in today, and he's actually away, so he can't do this. But who we are, so we had to go find who we were as a company, who we wanted to be, what we're currently portraying, and what is Surf Accounts portraying. And I think what we found as well, I suppose talking about the rebrand, just good that came up next, I suppose. We went through a little bit of a rebrand, a little less dramatic. So defining our target audience, who they are, who's the decision maker, what's the age bracket, what's the gender, where are we going to be focusing, what are they likely to do on a daily basis. So for us, our target audience was accountants, typically middle-aged, 40 to 65. A dominantly male profession, though that is changing quite quickly. We decided to focus nationally on Ireland because we had a couple more USPs here, and we wanted to build a base here before looking at the US and the UK, which we're starting to do now. Unlikely to use the likes of Snapchat, reading magazines, accounting bodies, a little bit more traditional. So what we had was, not likely to use Snapchat or Twitter too often. Accountants will read the magazine that are delivered monthly, quarterly, by the various accounting bodies, so we had to get ads into those. They'll read newspapers like Sunday Independent, Sunday Business Post. So again, we've done a little bit there, not as much as we'd like. Email campaigns have been huge for us, so it was really, like I said, back to basics. There wasn't an awful lot of innovative thinking or a lot of online stuff, which we probably should be doing as an online company. Attending CPD conferences that accountants are at constantly, and picking them up there. Listening to, they tend to listen to topical interest in radios, stations like News Talk, FM, and those type of things. So trying to get ads into those type of stations as well, was making sure we're doing that. Rather than what a lot of businesses are doing nowadays in terms of pushing the social media and things, something that we do need to get into, but we thought we'd stand better by starting with the basics and going through it that way.
Last October, UPC rebranded to Virgin Media. So with 14 weeks to roll out Virgin Media in Ireland and 450 touch points, our internal purpose is we make good things happen. And it's a really simple line, but it's this idea of how can you change the market so that you add value to your customers, add value to your internal customers. Driving demand and building a brand can be somewhat mutually exclusive within the one pot, because actually building a brand has a much longer term impact. It's almost you're building for future sales down the line, whereas driving demand is a much more short-term tactical kind of initiative. Other challenges I suppose we faced in the digital space, all of a sudden our rankings, our search engine rankings on the 5th of October went back to 0. So we would have had very high search rankings under UPC. But on the 5th of October, we're no longer UPC, we're virginmedia.ie. And probably for the first week, there was just no rankings out there, because we had to rebuild all of that all over again. So we had to invest very heavily in PPC and SEO activities just to try and get our rankings up, because we couldn't do it in a phased basis. We couldn't run the 2 URLs at the same time. We literally shut down UPC overnight and launched Virgin Media. So again, you're throwing away almost 10 years of rankings and Google rankings and starting afresh, and that was a challenge. All in all, a really great success story and a real sense that we delivered some magic as part of the launch. And I suppose that's really just the start of the journey. I'm just going to finish off on it was the first 360 immersive ad that was ever done on Facebook, which we launched in January. But I suppose once you're Virgin Media, really there's no going back. There's an expectation that you're going to constantly change the market and change the game and challenge people, which as marketeers is a really exciting place to be, but it's also quite a daunting place to be, because actually there's no place for inertia or status quo. You've got to be constantly pushing the envelope. But I think we're on a good journey and we're really happy with progress to date.
Here's Irish GDP per capita, purchasing power parity, if we're into those sort of things. Showing that in the past 20, 30 years or so, 35 years, our GDP per capita, kind of a measure of economic welfare in the country, has increased 7-fold since the early 1980s. All the coffee shops that are here, I'm now running a coffee cooperative with some guys there in Smithfield, and Now, I remember back in the 80s when the full gamut of coffee choices ranged from Nescafe to Maxwell House. If you were really sophisticated, you had granules rather than powder. Years. But we won't use that extra spending power to buy more stuff. Because actually what we do in business is that we buy feelings. And the real challenge that every marketer has is to ask yourself, how do you make your customers feel? Whether they're buying newspapers or telecom services or software packages or courses at the NCI. What is the feeling that they're buying? Because we all come back to buy feelings. And this is a real issue, I think, in marketing right now. There's a lot of investment going on in marketing, and yet when you look at the impact marketing has in terms of things like Net Promoter Score, you kind of wonder what the impact some of that is actually having. So, a friend or family or colleague, a product, a service, a newspaper, a telco, mobile phone service, a software package, that ultimately is about your sense of tribal belonging. So finally, let's talk about why I think the future agenda for marketing has to be about the growth agenda in your organizations. May mentioned in their talk that marketers are change agents, and that is absolutely the case. And the important thing to realize, and again this is from our report that we did last year, Customer Experience, download.
Every part of the business. I work in a business with 400 staff, from editorial to advertising sales people to editors. Huge passion, huge opinion, but to have a customer-centric approach in the centre of that, we needed data in order to make data-driven decisions as opposed to gut feeling. The culture of that was unprecedented insofar as editors don't really like to look in the mirror, and all the data that we were going to present would force editors of products to literally look at their product from a competitive perspective every incident. Coupled with that, digital news consumption is so extremely important that we understand how that's impacting on news frequency. The purchase of newspapers was embedded within the group. The number of room, I haven't spotted any, or else I'm giving away a lot of trade secrets. But this research allowed us to identify personas and also really focus on the things we weren't so good at. So value for money was something we had to address, that people were thinking, okay, how we were scoring, and we could show you some data. Our Net Promoter Score was very, very low by comparison. Some of our magazines and supplements, again, from purely a rating perspective, as opposed to a subjective gut feeling opinion, were not rating as well as our competitors. And again, some of our main sections in terms of the appeal, from particularly the Irish Independence perspective, from our customers' perspective, and I think this is probably the most important point, is that our customer has a very clear voice in our newsroom. Our editors are not only using this data, but data from online traffic, data from social media sharing, etc., that's telling editors what to publish and how to publish, which is very, very. So I guess the main message is that hero we're trying to find, who was our reader, is certainly here to stay. And my message for today is that a customer should be at the centre of every business, but the only way in which we put the customer at the centre of every business is to get data around it in order for you to make good and profitable decisions in today's market.